Welcome or welcome back to my channel. This video is coming a little bit late because we're so many days into October already. Well, I should say we're a few weeks into October, and I am just now uploading my September reading wrap up. Now, before you come for me, I will say I fell into a reading slump at the end of September, and I honestly felt like I had read 5 books. Turns out that I read a few more books than 5, so yay for that, right? There is a God and he is gracious, but I actually read a decent amount of books. Some of them have been really great, so we're actually just gonna jump right into it. My favorite book from the month of September is going to be Not Under the Love Song by Julie Soto. If I could summarize this book in a few words to you, is if you don't know how to play an instrument, by the end of this book you're going to want to learn how to play so that maybe you can also find your happily ever after. The 2 main characters for this book are in an orchestra and they have to work together to perform songs. He can't stand her. She is low-key like a secret admirer of him, loves him, and there's just a little bit of like enemies to lovers banter between the two. But there's just so much music and songs that they perform together that if you're somebody that loves music, you're gonna eat this book up. I loved every single second of the story. It was just so wholesome and easy to follow along. The settings felt very realistic and the characters were very easy to understand. I have nothing but good things to say about this book. This was the book that actually took me out of my reading slump because I had been sick in September and a few weeks into October, and I was just on so much medication that reading a book that was very easy to understand, I didn't have to like take that much time to be like, okay, where am I? What do the characters look like? It was very simple to follow along, and because of that, I absolutely love this. This is perfection in my eyes. I also listened to the audiobook for That Time I Got Drunk and Saved by a Demon. The audiobook is 7 hours long. It's short, sweet, and straight to the point. And the quickest way that I can summarize this book for you is that the female lead is walking home, stumbles upon a demon that then tries to kill her, doesn't end up killing her, and instead asks for her help on a magical quest. And then they go on a magical quest together. This is literally just great banter. It's hilarious. It is kind of like a romantasy, but it's extremely spicy. And there's not any heavy world building. And like, there's so many characters that come into play as the story evolves that you're just going to absolutely love this. This book is just a really good time. I can see why this book got picked up by a publisher, and there's an entire series. I will probably be finishing this entire series. Now, Partners in Crime is an audiobook that took me like 4 weeks to listen to. It's really not that long of a book. I was really just not vibing with it. Easiest way I can summarize this book is, you know what's worse than having to see your ex after a very long time? Is actually being taken with your ex that you haven't seen in a very long time and being forced to work together to find an item that your con artist father stole from a very bad man. The premise of the story sounded like it was going to be really entertaining and it was going to have you hooked from the very beginning, and that was not the case for me. I honestly had to push myself to finish this story. They just kept jumping from one setting to another setting because they were trying to find this item that her dad had taken from somebody else, and then they just kept being put in like worse and worse situations, and at one point I was like, okay, enough, I get it, like they're gonna go into another bad scenario that they have to somehow get out of. So I was a little sick of it by the end of it just because it kept being really repetitive, but I think somebody else might enjoy this book a little bit more than I did. It just really wasn't my cup of tea. The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic is a book that is going to make you cry, and you should know that because it says heartbreak in the title. That went right over my head. I was getting my lashes done and almost bawled my eyes out because of this book, especially the audiobook. It is fabulous and it's gonna have you deep in your feelings. To quickly summarize this book for you, the FMC for this is a witch, and after 4 heartbreaks in her lifetime, she's going to lose her magic. Now, things happen in her life and everything's pretty much chaotic. Her grandma is on her deathbed. Her ex-boyfriend that broke her heart comes back to town. She has problems with her brother and her family. So there is so much that is going on in her life that could lead to our heartbreak. So the entire time you're just on the edge of your seat and you're just wondering, who's going to break this girl's heart? Because somebody's gonna break her heart. And the most important thing about this story, in my opinion, was the family trope. Not the found family trope, the family trope. Because you would have thought it was going to be a boyfriend or an ex-boyfriend that was actually going to break her heart. But in the story, there's so much conflict between the family members that do love one another, but they just have so many internal issues and secrets from one another that you feel like it's a family member that is going to break her heart instead of a man. So that was super entertaining for me. I loved it. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I would definitely recommend it. It was perfect for fall. There was a theme this month. A Werewolf's Guide to Seducing a Vampire is another great book that you should read during the fall season. It has vampires, werewolves, magical creatures, a magical town. What else? Honestly, I feel like those should be good enough reasons for you to pick up the story. Quick summary of this book. The male lead for this book is a werewolf, and he goes home from his friend's wedding very sad, so he's drunk, goes on eBay at 3 a.m. and buys a gemstone for a penny. Gemstone shows up at his house and he thinks it is literally a toy gemstone. No, there's actually a vampire stuck within it, and he releases her only to learn that she hasn't been let out since 1969 and she's actually a trained assassin. So he then has to help this vampire acclimate to the 21st century and how to use a microwave and how to drive a car and all this sort of things. This is a very entertaining book, but it's very slow paced. So this is one that you're gonna want to take your time with. You're not gonna want to devour this book, but it's really funny. And I have nothing but good things to say about the characters and the townspeople. It turns out this is book 3 in a series. I will be finishing the series, but did I know that this is book 3 before I started reading it? No. Now I have zero regrets because sometimes it be like that. This is a standalone, so you can read it by itself, but if you're like me and you like to read a complete series, then there's book 1 and book 2. I think Book Outlet has them on sale right now, if I'm not mistaken. They might still be on sale. If you know Book Outlet, you know they rotate their inventory, but last time I checked, they were on there for like $8. Foxglove is book 2 to Belladonna. And I really did enjoy this book. I was a little upset by the fact that the characters that we were hoping to follow during the story didn't really get that much time in front of the cameras, as some people would say. I know it's a book and it wasn't a movie, but you just roll with me here, okay? Some new characters were introduced in this book, and they had to be introduced because book 3 follows them, right? So I can't be mad at it, but I'm kind of a little salty. I did actually enjoy this book, and I am happy that our main characters have a happily ever after, because I was going to riot if they did not have a happily ever after. I really was going to. For one point there, I didn't know if they were going to, but they did, so it's fine. I can't say too much about this book because I don't want to spoil it for you if you haven't read book 1. Just know that this series is 5 stars and you should read it. It's a paranormal romance, so it's perfect for the fall season. If you want to know what it's like to wake up in the middle of the week and starting your week on a Wednesday instead of a Monday, then you can read this book because that's what it feels like. This book starts out with you being in the middle of a war zone, a library's burning down, and where sometimes you do like to start your books with like impact and being fast-paced and okay, just take me on a roller coaster, I'm ready to go. This one just felt very messy to me. Like, I didn't know the characters, I didn't know where we were. Let me stop ranting about this book. To give you a quick summary of The Spell Shop, which I know has been everywhere, everybody and their mama's trying to read this book right now because it's beautiful, it's so pretty, look at it. Just take a second, I know. It's gorgeous. So The Spell Shop follows a female lead that is actually a librarian, and she works at this magical library guarding magical books. The library goes up in flames because of a revolution, so she escapes the library, takes a few of the books with her, and takes the books with her to a magical island that she used to live at growing up. When she's on the island, she tries to help the island's people with the magic that she knows from these books, but regular people can't use magic, and that's part of the reason why there's a revolutionary war. If you use magic and you're not supposed to use magic, then you could go to prison or you could die. All of that sounds really interesting, right? When you put all that together, you're like, oh my god, this story is really going to have me at the edge of my seat the entire time, and it's going to be really entertaining. Unfortunately, that was not the case for me. This book had a lot of moving parts. There were some great things about this book. The magical creatures were cool, the islands, the settings, the magic, the actual storyline, it was all great. Where it felt short for me is that it wasn't really brought together in a way that made sense. And there's a lot of plot holes within the story. I was left with more questions than answers by the end of this book. And honestly, I know that there's going to be a book 2. I do not care to read book 2 just because I was so confused. And I didn't know until the very end of the book that the female lead has blue hair. I could go on and on about this book. I really don't want to, because if you love this book, that's great. I love that for you. Seriously, I do. I don't like to rain on anybody's parade. But when it came to the story, it was all over the place for me. And none of it was brought together flawlessly. It wasn't. I was just like, what is going on? And the love interest, you know, we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on. I can't keep talking about this book. A Love Song for Ricky Wilde is a book that needs to be on your TBR. Honestly, any book by Tia Williams, but this one specifically, and this one is actually great for the fall season, and I won't tell you why. I'm gonna leave it as a surprise because I actually went into it not knowing that it was a great book for fall. I just read this because the cover looks beautiful and it was perfect. Literally perfect. Their plot twist for this, there's no way you can see the plot twist coming. My jaw was on the floor and it's still on the floor. I'm gonna leave it there. That's how shocked I was. The female lead for this book works at a morgue. Her family owns a morgue. Well, she doesn't want to be in that business anymore. She actually wants to open up a florist shop. So she decides to tell her family that they don't take it well. So she decides to basically take life by the reins and make it happen and create this business from the ground up. Things start to happen for her, doors begin to open, and things are going good. One day she meets this man at a park and she instantly falls in love with him because he's like the most beautiful man she has ever seen. But then he tells her, "You can't fall in love with me, otherwise you're going to die." That right there, ladies and gentlemen, is where I fell in love with this book, because what do you mean she's gonna die if she falls in love with you? What? So, I'm not gonna tell you anymore after that. Just know that this has a lot of secrets and plot twists, and you're gonna try to put pieces together. At one point, I thought this book had to do with time traveling. It has absolutely nothing to do with time traveling, but it's gonna have you hooked because you're gonna wanna figure out why is she going to die if she falls in love with you. Perfect infinity stars. If I could give this book more than a 5-star rating, I definitely would. This was perfection, in my opinion. The Foxglove King is a book that I actually soft DNF'd the first time around, and I am not mad that it took me so long to read this book, because maybe I shouldn't have read it. Well, maybe I shouldn't have read this when I read Belladonna and Foxglove, because a lot of the poisons that are talked about in this book are actually talked about in Foxglove and Belladonna, so I got a little confused about that. But I believe I gave this a 3 out of 5. It's a solid book. I just really don't care for the characters as much as I thought I was going to care for it. The female lead for the Foxglove King is a necromancer. Now, she has to keep her ability a secret because it's actually illegal in the kingdom that she lives in. Of course, something happens where she is brought in front of the king because of something that she does, and then the king finds out about her secret ability, and then he pretty much gives her an ultimatum, which is, you can help me figure out why people around our town are dying, or I'm going to hang you. And she wants to live, so of course she's like, what do you need me to do? And he pretty much tasks her with being a spy on the prince, which is his son, because he believes that the prince is actually the one that is at fault for all these people dying. The ending was just very predictable, in my opinion. I really didn't care for the characters. The world building was pretty basic. I didn't dislike this book. I wouldn't give it anything lower than a 3 because I do think it's a good story. You could just see all the plot twists coming from a mile away, or at least I could see it, so I really wasn't surprised when like this would happen. I did really want to like this book. A lot of my friends absolutely love and adore it, and unfortunately I was just not in that bandwagon. You win some and you lose some, and for this one, unfortunately, I lost. If it looks like I've been crying, it's because I have. What an intermission. It's been like 10 seconds for you guys, but it's been like 30 minutes for me. I was just explaining to my boyfriend what the nickname Moonbeam means because I made a TikTok video about it and he was like, what does it mean? So I told him and then I started crying. If you have not read this book, please go read it. That's all I'm gonna say for it. I did not read this book in September. This is in a different wrap-up video of mine, but I just love that book so freaking much. And every single time I think about the nickname Moonbeam, I cry. I'm not gonna cry. I am not gonna cry. We're gonna move on to the books that I was talking about. The Morrigan is a quick little novella that you're actually supposed to read when you're starting the Remnant Chronicles. And if you've read Dance of Thieves and Vow of Thieves, so those are a prequel to the Remnant Chronicles, and book 1 is called The Kiss of Deception. So I actually did start reading this so I could understand the plotline a little bit better and like the magic system for when I read The Kiss of Deception. I did read The Kiss of Deception, but I read that in October, so that's why it's not in the wrap up for this video. Boy oh boy, please don't kill me for this one. I read From Blood and Ash. I'm actually doing a separate reading vlog for this entire series and it is not going well, you guys. So I read From Blood and Ash. I'm gonna give this a 3 out of 5. I don't understand the hype behind this series. I really like Poppy. She's like the one most interesting character out of everybody for me. I don't like how people were treating her, so because of that I did keep reading and I was just wanted to figure out what was going to happen with her, like her magic. Hawke, see, I can't really talk about this book without giving away any spoilers. I know some people feel very strongly about this series, and I'm hoping that I might too by the end of it, but we shall see. I did read Look But Don't Touch by Meg Everly, and the quickest way I can summarize this book for you is that a psychologist gets a new client. The client doesn't like to be touched, but funny enough, the psychologist actually goes to an adult club and she likes to be bound and tied up and have people touch her. Well, not people, a person, I should say. But she doesn't know the identity of the person. It's like a secret identity. So then this book just follows her life as like she's dealing with this new client and then another client that's bringing a lot of anxiety into her life and stress. And then she goes to this club to like release some of the stress. But then things happen and then her club life and her life outside of the club actually start to integrate, and she has no idea how the two are getting mixed up, but they are. This is actually book 1 in the series. There's going to be 3 of them, and I actually have book 2 on my Kindle right now. It's called Forever We Fall. I'm really excited to continue the series because at the end of book 3 there's like a new character that was brought into the relationship, and I was like, what is happening? I thought this was going to be like a 2-person thing, and now there's 3 people in it. The ending chapters were freaking fantastic. So I really do want to see what happens with this rest of this series. I'm really excited to read it. This series is extremely spicy, so if you're somebody and that's your cup of tea, then this will be perfect for you. If you prefer YA books, stay away from this one. This one's not for you. You Again screams fall. But I will say you don't necessarily have to read this book during the fall season. You could definitely read this any other time of the year and it would be perfectly fine. Maybe not in the summertime. That's the only time that it wouldn't make sense. But like if you read this in spring, you will be fine. This book follows 2 characters that actually meet because they're sleeping with the same person. And then that person ends up breaking with both of them. Then both of their lives take like very tragic turns of events. And then they meet again years later and they're kind of like each other's only friends. It was kind of sad. They had a very negative first meet, but then they ended up being like the best of friends, and then from there started dating. The one thing that kind of got on my nerves for this, or I would say I would nitpick on, is the fact that the female lead for this was into women. She married a woman. She was having issues getting over a woman. I mean, they met because they were both sleeping with a woman. That was her identity. Like that's what her character was. And it was never portrayed that she was into the opposite sex until the last 20% of the book. And then all of a sudden, she likes a man. So that kind of came out of left field. Like if it was introduced like, okay, she is bi instead of being like a lesbian, that would have made a lot more sense for me. Like, okay, she's bi, she likes women and men. But it was kind of just introduced as, okay, she likes women and he likes women and that's what they have in common, and then all of a sudden now she likes men. That didn't really make sense for me. Like I feel like for that to take place, it should have been introduced to us a little bit earlier. Like, okay, she is into both genders, not just one. So I mean, people can change, I get that. I'm not saying that, right? Don't come for me. People are allowed to change. I just feel like the way that it was written, it could have been written a little bit better for the readers to digest, like, okay, she is interested in him, because it kind of came out of left field, even though we didn't know that they were going to end up together because it's a romance book, right? And he was the male lead and she was the female lead. So like we knew that, but I don't know. I feel like I'm just ranting at this point. I did give this book a 3 out of 5 overall. I'm not hating on it. There's just some things that I feel like could have been done better for us to understand the story much, much easier. You know what's better than a book with dragons? A book with dragon shifters, but make it a white shoes. I read Twilight of Embers and I completely ate this book up. I read the story within 8 hours on my Kindle because I could not put it down. So the female lead for this book, her parents end up getting killed within the first chapters of this book. I think it actually happens in the prologue. This book started out with a bang, and she ends up growing up in the foster system. From there, she goes to college, and then when she gets to college, she meets this group of guys, and they all seem to know who she is, but she has no idea who she is. So you're pretty much trying to figure out her real identity, because we didn't really know her identity because her parents died when she was very young. And then the whole mystery of why her parents died, why people want her, why is she so important, why are these group of guys interested in her even though she has no idea who they are and she just met them, but something within her is telling her that she can trust them. So this book had a lot of moving pieces, and I feel like it did flow very easy for you to grasp. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5. I was into it because there's dragons in it. And one thing about me, if it has dragons in it... My cats have the zoomies right now. That's great. That's fabulous. I think they're done. For now. If you hear them again, I'm sorry. What was I saying? I just forgot. If a book has dragons in it, I want it in my life. I love dragons and anything that has to do with dragons, and I never read a dragon shifter romance before. I've read shifter romances before, but dragon shifter, that was a whole new category, and I'm here for it. I also read Come Out, Come Out, and this book took me by surprise. I've been going into books blindly recently. It just makes things 10 times more fun for me, honestly. And I was not expecting this storyline. Did I read this for Halloween? No. I read this, why did I read this? Oh, I read this for Hispanic Heritage Month. That's what I was reading because the author is a Latina. And I did not know what I was going to expect. It is a dark romance, so I was like, okay, it's gonna be something traumatizing, right? I mean, it was traumatizing, but it was actually pretty entertaining. I need to stop using that word. I need a different word besides entertaining. Fun, joyful, enjoyable. Enjoyable is good. We can use enjoyable. I'm getting off track here. The quickest way I could summarize this book for you is that the female lead moves into a whole new house. Turns out the house is haunted, and the ghost of the house begins to torment all of them. Now, the ghost torments her roommates enough to move out, but the ghost actually has the hots for our female lead. And from there, use your imagination. Yes, that's right. I had no idea how that was going to work out, but it was very interesting on how things worked out so they could be together. And then the ending was giving Romeo and Juliet a whole new meaning. I love this book. I have nothing bad to say about the story. It is very short. It kind of reads like a novella, even though I don't think it is a novella. I think this is actually like a full-size book. But it was very quick. And just keep an open mind as you read this. That's all I'm gonna say for it. I did also ARC read First Time Caller, and I was so happy to have received an ARC from NetGalley for this. If you don't have a NetGalley account and you're like, how do people get ARCs? NetGalley. Honestly, it's one of the easiest platforms to use if you ask me, and then your ARCs just go right into your Kindle library, or if you get an audiobook, then you can just play it on the NetGalley app. This video is not sponsored by NetGalley. I just love it, so that's why I wanted to tell you how I got the ARC. But First Time Caller follows a female lead that is actually a single mom. She finds her daughter very late at night talking to a man on the phone, and it's not her father because he actually lives next door. So she walks into the room and she's like, who are you talking to? Takes the phone from her daughter and finds out that she's actually talking to a radio hostess that hosts a show about people finding love or falling in love. It's like a romance hotline. So the daughter called the romance hotline because she was worried about the mom being sad and lonely. And then the mom ends up talking to the hostess for the radio show. Their call goes viral. And then the owner of the radio show calls the mom a few days later and it's like, hey, we actually want to do a segment to help you find love. If Love is Blind and The Circle had a baby, it would be First Time Caller. It does also read like a Hallmark movie. Like, it's very easy for you to picture it as you read. And all the characters just make you feel so loved. Every single character was very important. And for most books, you know how like you have your favorites? In this one, they were all my favorites because if you take one character out of the story, it's not going to hit you the same because they all have very important roles to play to help you fall in love with not only just the story, but the characters and the place and everything that happens. I gave this 5 stars. This is freaking fantastic, and I cannot wait for this to release just so I can actually get a paper copy to add to my shelves. Those are all the books that I read in the month of September, and I'm going to tell you right now, I was just as surprised as you are that I read this many because I was actually fighting a reading slump at the end of September because I got sick. I feel like my October reading wrap up is going to be a lot shorter because I didn't read the first 2 weeks in October, but nevertheless, here we are. Sometimes you have good reading months, sometimes you don't, and I feel like in September, we just have so many books that are being released and you want to read all of them, but you really can't. I wish we could read every single book. Like, I wish I could hold a book, put it next to my brain, and like it just automatically goes in my brain, like downloads into my brain, like you download music. That would be fantastic. Thank you so much for watching this video and supporting my channel. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you can be notified the next time that I post a video, and I will be back soon with more bookish content. Bye for now.